Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of Reddit Podcast Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. Karen demands I charge my son rent to live in a house that he partially owns. After that, my brother married the mother of his daughter's bully and moved them into his house. And after that, heavy metal finance. Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen does not get to steal her neighbor's Wi-Fi. But their speeds are so much faster than ours. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Karen demands I charge my son rent to live in a house that he partially owns. My oldest son, who's 24, is not my wife's biological kid. He was my son with my late wife. My late wife and I bought a 3-bedroom house when we got married. When I remarried, my current wife moved into this house with me, but I never put her name on the deed. The house was only in my name. My wife and I ended up having several kids and needing to move into a bigger house. When we bought our new home, she wanted me to sell the old one. I said no, that this home was something my late wife and I purchased with the hope of one day passing on to our son. I would make it a rental property instead. That was one of the biggest fights we had ever had. She insisted we make a compromise, but I refused to do so. When my son graduated from college, I put his name on the deed to the house with mine, which was another fight. But I felt he was the appropriate inheritor to his mother's share. I didn't share any of the rental income with him though, as I was still paying all of the taxes and insurance. At this point, the mortgage is paid off. I net over $2,000 a month from this house, which goes into the household budget. My son just got engaged and he wants to move into the house after he marries his fiancée. He suggested he pay half of the rent and eventually buy out my share of the house. I told my son I agreed to his plan of saving up to buy out my share. But instead of paying rent, he should just take over the taxes and insurance. We agreed to this. My wife is livid and says that I'm a massive jerk for dramatically decreasing our household income without consulting her. She likened my decision to financial mistreatment. I suggested we downsize to a smaller house now that our oldest 2 kids are leaving the nest, and we could rent out the larger one and be in the same situation as before, owning 2 homes and getting rental income on one. She called me a selfish jerk and won't even speak to me now. Am I the jerk? You're the jerk. Why even get married if you refuse to take anything that your wife says seriously? Maybe try treating her like an actual human and take what she has to say into consideration. There's no telling how many years this woman has been allowing you to be her husband, sharing her life with you, building a family with you, and even at this point, after all these years, you still flat out disregard what she has to say because you side with your daddy's boy. If she had known you would go on to pick your nepotism baby over her, I doubt she would have wasted her life with you. I hope she leaves you and is They always say that. I hope she leaves you and is able to get her fair share, which involves you selling that house and splitting the profits with her, not with your daddy's boy who wants to live in daddy's house for the rest of his life. Your wife deserves so much better. My brother married the mother of his daughter's bully and moved them into his house. My brother, 39 male, has a daughter, Piper, who's 15. When Piper was 4, her mom passed. My brother told Piper so much about her, and they had some special photos of her mom that were treasured. When Piper was 6, she started being teased by this girl called Nancy, who's now 15. It continued on for over a year and ultimately came to a head when Nancy tore up a photo of Piper's mom that Piper brought into school for some show-and-tell family edition her class was doing. From that day on, Piper did not like Nancy. Because of that incident, my brother and Nancy's mom met. They became friends, and a few months after the incident, where Nancy tore up the photo, they started dating, and they married a year later. Piper pulled away from my brother when she found out he was dating Nancy's mom, and even more when they moved in together and got married. Nancy was actually happy and tried to get close to Piper, but Piper wanted nothing to do with that. Nancy's mom mentioned how being sisters would mend the rift, and I thought that was kind of crazy given what went down. My brother only mentioned to me recently that he really thought Piper and Nancy would be sisters and would be close by now. But Piper doesn't want anything to do with Nancy still and doesn't trust her around anything important. I told my brother that's because he moved too fast to get that kind of relationship with them. I said he and his wife started dating and Nancy hadn't even apologized, and then Piper was still upset about who he was dating and Nancy being in her life more when they got married. I told him at no point did he try to make what happened better for Piper. He thought his marriage license would somehow erase the hurt Piper felt and the bullying Nancy put Piper through for more than a year. I said maybe if he had given it time, let Nancy apologize, and given the girls space where they weren't living together to interact outside of school, things could have been different. But you had one kid who was hurt and angry, and another who was eager to have a dad and a sibling after only having her mom. My brother said I expected him to let Piper dictate his life. I said no, not what I said. I said if he wanted Piper to be happy and embrace Nancy as a sibling, then he should have taken things more slowly to get that outcome. He told me it was none of my business and I was overstepping and I'm just his little sister. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. Your brother sucks and he needed to hear it. Being sisters will mend the rift is the kind of BS rationalization people make when they don't want to face how disgusting it is that they're bringing Piper's bully into her home, into her family. My brother said I expected him to let Piper dictate his life? Ugh, yeah, God forbid a parent be expected to prioritize their kid's well-being or anything. What your brother needs to realize is that, sure, he can refuse to care about his teenage daughter, but Piper is fast approaching the age of adulthood when he can no longer dictate her life. I think he'll be in for a rude awakening when his daughter drops him just as coldly as he's dropped her. Not the jerk. He shoved aside his daughter's feelings for his own personal happiness. I think it's incredibly gross he even started being friends with the parent of his daughter's bully, much less dating and then marrying her. Did they tell this lovely story of how they met at their wedding? He's probably permanently damaged his relationship with his daughter. And your brother is the one who brought it up. You didn't just say it out of nowhere. If it wasn't your business, then maybe he shouldn't have been talking about it with you. He's just mad you called him out on his BS. This is gonna come full circle when Piper goes no contact once she's old enough to leave home. People don't magically embrace their unapologetic bullies because their parents decided to shack up and force them into a sibling relationship. This whole dynamic is probably a nightmare come true for Piper. You are right on all fronts, but there's very little he can do now to mend the situation, which he massively fumbled, so I understand why he would rather play dumb. Not the jerk. Nobody is the jerk in this situation. Your brother was hurting and found love. He found it, good for him, but he didn't do a good job handling the situation with his daughter. That doesn't make him a jerk. Parents aren't perfect. Things can be handled in better ways, and as long as you learn from mistakes or are willing to evolve as a parent, it's okay. No jerks here. Not that your brother would take your advice now, but he and Piper should be in family therapy together so that Piper can communicate her feelings to her dad in a safe space. At the very least, Piper should be in therapy so she can process her feelings about losing her mom at such a young age. That's the biggest elephant in the room in my opinion, since it doesn't sound like Piper's dad tells her stories about her mom much anymore. Heavy metal finance. Quite a few years ago, in the late 1990s and very early on in my career, I used to work for a company that helped customers of certain retail stores manage their finances. My role was as a sort of compliance officer, ensuring that the staff who dealt with customers were following the rules. If they messed it up, it was a big problem and could potentially impact the customer's credit score, result in them defaulting on payments, and even end up in court. I took my job pretty seriously. The company was not particularly well run from a management perspective. They had made a lot of money very quickly and had grown from a handful of people in a garage to a 4-story office building within the space of a year and a half. There wasn't a great deal in the way of policy or process framework, so I had to develop a lot of the tools to do my job myself. This involved some programming, a basic system to track what I was doing, linked to the extensive rule set, and automate some of the more tedious reporting. It would also track how long I was spending on each task so that I could see about which elements I could streamline. Now, I was quite proud of this system and called it Hendrix, as I'm a massive Jimi Hendrix fan, and it used to play about 5 seconds of the instrumental version of Little Wing when it started up. As I had my own little room, cupboard, this never used to annoy anyone. I can geek out about that kind of stuff. At this point, before corporate IT became rather more rigid, I used to write a lot of my own tools. I was the only person who was using Hendrix, and it was a tool just for me. My manager, the archetype middle manager, decided that because it allowed you to quickly reference which rules applied to which situation, it should be rolled out to all staff. Now, I had previously considered this, but I argued that I couldn't guarantee that it would be fit for task because I had designed it for my own use, and I'd need to make some changes first. But he rolled it out anyway, without me even getting a chance to tweak it. He got a Team Player of the Week award for introducing a tool to make life easier for frontline staff. In his acceptance speech, that was a big rah-rah thing each week for the company, he thanked his manager. I didn't even get a mention. Then, 2 weeks later, he realized that I'd been recording how long I had been working on a certain task within the program. Now, I'd realized fairly quickly that this part of the program was a little too detailed, and I didn't really care too much about every single task within each incident. So I just used it to record how long I spent on the entire incident, rather than each part of the incident. My manager invited me to a meeting about Hendrix, no details given, and I attended thinking it was going to be a list of requested features, only to find out that the head of HR was there and I was being given a written warning for falsifying timekeeping. Because each customer interaction was a certain length, my manager had decided that this was what I should be recording, and not how long I was spending listening to, analyzing, checking, and reporting on the interaction. Remember, this is a tool that I had designed for my own use, and it was not being used to calculate how much I was being paid, or whether I was doing enough work during the day or not. There was nothing in place for that at all. I had not made the records public. He had found them in a file on the server that only he and I had access to. Nobody else was supposed to even have this tool. I argued this and was told that it wasn't up to me and I was getting a warning regardless. It got quite heated and unpleasant, though I got the impression that the head of HR was a little embarrassed about the whole thing. They said, however, that if I wanted to consult a lawyer, I was quite within my rights to do so. It was at this point that I was rather smugly able to state that I could get 2 lawyers there within the hour, as both my parents were practicing, and my mother was, in point of fact, an employment lawyer. Suddenly, there was a completely different attitude from my manager. There was an attempt to roll back the issue and turn it into a suggestion that perhaps I should be a bit more careful with my timekeeping in the future, but I was pretty angry at this point. I pointed out that my software had been rolled out to all staff against my wishes. I was told that this wasn't up to me, as it was company intellectual property, until I advised them that I'd written it in my own time, at home on my own computer. It was plugging into the office government rule set, and not the corporate intranet one. I had not confirmed it fit for general release at all. I had received special dispensation from IT to install it on a single work computer, mine, and I would require them to pay a license fee for anything beyond this. To be fair, this would have been tied up in court for a long time, and I've got no idea whether I'd have been successful. So in the end, I relented. If they wanted to use Hendrix, well, I guess they could. I just made sure that Little Wing would play for 1 second longer on startup for every week the software was in use. Then I quit the following Monday and was working for another company by the Monday after that. 3 or 4 months later, I got a phone call from my former manager asking me to come fix the problems with my software. He hung up when I quoted him my consultant fees. I don't know why IT wasn't able to figure it out. It was just a setting in a text file, not all that hard to find. A friend who remained in the company tells me they continued to use Hendrix for a whole year. The mornings in the call center were apparently horrifying, with Little Wing playing for around a minute every time someone started a new shift. Sometimes it would play on 20 computers at once, a few seconds apart, on tiny PC speakers that were unable, due to IT, to mute. My son asked out a girl as a prank. I have 3 kids. Oldest is at university, so it's just me, my wife, and them, who are 16 and 11. All my kids are kids who have been raised very well, and they've grown to be people I'm proud to call my own. My son recently had some friends over, and things were going fine. I went upstairs at one point to bring them the pizza they had ordered when I overheard my son talking about how his friends owed him something for asking a girl in their class out as a prank. From what I gathered, the girl was someone his friends didn't deem attractive enough and a load of other BS. I decided to talk to my son about it after his friends left to save him from embarrassment. I did raise my voice a bit, but that was due to how maddening the whole situation was. The same thing had happened to my cousin when we were younger, and I saw how the whole thing affected her as she took on new relationships. My son argued back that it was just a prank that wouldn't hurt anyone and that I was going against him by listening to his friends' private conversations, and said that while he felt sorry for my cousin, he was mature enough to understand to not pull the prank any further. I didn't listen to any other excuses he gave and decided to ground him for 2 weeks. He said that I shouldn't have any say in this, when the whole thing had nothing to do with me. My wife claims that boys will be boys, and that it's something harmless. When I asked her how she'd feel if this was played on our daughter, she simply said, "That won't happen, because she has good genes." Mother-in-law and father-in-law are blowing up the family group chat about how I'm hurting their baby for normal teenage boy behavior. So, am I the jerk? If I'm being too nosy about an act that has nothing to do with me, I'll take back my son's grounding. Not the jerk. Your son is a bully. Your wife sounds like a piece of work. Agreed. As someone who was asked out as a prank and still has scars from it 20 years later, not the jerk. OP, this is not a harmless joke. I guarantee the girl that he was talking about won't find it funny. Please don't back down. My best friend pulled a prank like that on me in 4th grade. 50 plus years later, I still hate her guts for it. It ruined my dating years because my self-confidence was destroyed at 9 years old. This happened to me in 5th grade, and I found out in high school it was a whole joke at the other middle school that a geek like me thought someone as cool as Matt would date me. I used it as a teaching tool when I taught middle school, but I still think about how horrible that was to do to someone. Same happened to me in 9th grade. It took me a very long time to trust again, and it damaged my self-confidence for even longer. This isn't a harmless prank, and it does hurt people. Frankly, I think 2 weeks grounding is the least of the kid's worries if he can't see how this could really hurt someone after what OP said. Wow, can't believe how many of y'all got asked out as a prank. No wonder y'all spend all your time on Reddit. That also explains why y'all have such twisted views of relationships and why y'all can't stand dudes. Look, I'm sorry y'all had these bad experiences as kids, but you need to move on and just go on with your life. I had bad experiences too when I was a kid. Nothing to rival y'all getting asked out as a literal prank, but I had my fair share of misfortune. One time I took my Pokemon card collection to school, and during lunch, someone stole the whole folder from my backpack. It was the hardest loss I've ever taken, and I still think about it to this day. But I don't let it control my life. I would have much preferred to be asked out as a prank than to lose my entire collection of Pokemon cards, which included my first edition holographic Charizard, which is now worth thousands of dollars. And y'all think you had it bad. Dude sounds like a jerk, but I do think we should drop Fs in the chat for that holographic Charizard. Bizarre safety procedures at work cause a hilarious Cobra effect. I'm a senior electrical engineer in the industrial sector. I started work at a huge firm a few weeks ago, and right off, my superior detailed what was expected of me every quarter. Among the requirements were one safety violation report a month. I thought, okay, I could keep myself from messing up more than once a month. This is a large factory with everything from spinning grinders to steaming corrosives, so obviously OSHA is a big issue here. But this isn't my first rodeo, so to speak. I generally know what I'm doing. So my first month goes by, and I keep everything nice and safe. End of month, one-on-one rolls around. Boss makes it clear, to my surprise, that the requirement is for me to file at least one safety violation a month. Obviously, I inquired how one could go about controlling safety violations as they are inherently accidents, and if I had any way to influence their appearance, I would prevent them in the first place. But he just said I need to keep my eyes open, the violations will appear. Fine, I kept my eyes open, but honestly, everything seemed perfectly in order. Everyone else in my department were ticking off safety violations one after another, and I was nearing the end of month 2 with nothing. I would go on walks looking for safety infringements instead of working. Something seemed off, so I looked into the safety violations report Excel, and I was just stupefied. This was a list of the most unbelievably inane infractions I've ever set my eyes upon. I'll give you some examples. Infraction: cabinet door was left open in room, someone could hit their head. Immediate mitigation: cabinet door closed. Future mitigation: add magnets to cabinet doors. There were countless other esoteric reports like unexplained puddle next to electrical cabinet, or stack of cables on floor. I couldn't believe it. These well-educated grown men and women just writing nonsensical safety violations on absolutely anything. I tried approaching one of the guys about it, but he just said to keep my eyes open. The violations will appear. They kept repeating it like it's a mantra, then changed the subject. I thought this was ridiculous enough, but then one day a report came in about a ladder missing one of the plastic caps on its legs. Immediate mitigation: plastic cap found elsewhere and secured in its place. Now, I was the last one to use this ladder the day before, and it was perfectly fine, which led me to my conclusion that this man was purposely sabotaging company equipment just so he can fix it and then write his safety violation report. I feel like I'm in an episode of The Office. Everyone I approach about this just brushes it off, maybe because I'm the new guy. Anyway, I couldn't show up to my second monthly evaluation sans safety report, so I went to a random grounding cable, slightly unfastened the bolt, took a picture, and then fastened it back in place. I wrote a report about it, and the OSHA guy commended me in person about my vigilance. Is this a department-wide grift? Are the managers unaware of this farce, or are they just playing along? Usually, this would be a huge red flag, but everyone is otherwise really nice and the pay is great. Anyway, ideas as to what I should sabotage next month are welcome. My brother chose a dog over me. I'm 28, female. My brother, who's 26, was my best friend growing up. He didn't feel the same way. I was a lot more awkward as a kid, so I often just followed his friend group around, even though many of them bullied me. He never stood up for me, but when we were alone, he went back to being fun and nice, so I always forgave him. When we were teenagers and got part-time jobs, I started buying him birthday and Christmas presents, even though he never did the same for me. Our parents said it was because he's younger and would eventually, but to this day, I have never received a gift from him personally. Now that we're adults, I call and text him occasionally to check in, and though he's nice when he responds, he doesn't initiate. I figured that was just how he is. I always put more work in, but he's my brother and I love him. I'm graduating from graduate school soon, and I invited my whole family out to celebrate. Everyone got a plane ticket and hotel room I'm paying for, and it's been planned out for months. The other day, my brother called me to say that he was picking up a new puppy the day before my graduation and that he couldn't make it. Something inside me broke a little. I asked if it really had to be that day, if he couldn't postpone it for a week or something, but he said no dice and to cancel his reservations. I said okay and I hung up. I decided I was done being in a one-way relationship with him, even though I always thought of him as my best friend. Later, I was talking to our mom and she was saying how excited she is to see us, and I told her, "Oh, brother's not coming. He chose a dog over me." She asked what I was talking about and I explained. She said she was disappointed but not surprised. Word got out and my brother called me, really hushed and sad, and said that what I'd said wasn't cool. I said I just told the truth. He called me a jerk and we haven't spoken since. I said what I said in anger and bitterness, but now I'm really feeling guilty because I've always forgiven my brother and I've never heard him sound the way he did on the phone. Am I the jerk? Edit, because I guess I didn't share some things properly. I didn't invite myself to parties or social events my brother got invited to with his friends. When I said I followed around his friend group, I meant sit near them on the school bus or during assemblies. My brother has a social life outside of me, which I was not invited to, nor forced myself into. I did not insert myself into his friend groups, just that when they were group functions, I would hover near them as opposed to being in a corner. When we were alone, we acted very friendly with each other and we would hang out regularly, like playing video games together. He did agree to go to my graduation before I bought the hotel and plane tickets. I did not assume he would attend. If he didn't want you telling people he backed out of your graduation festivities to get a dog, he shouldn't have backed out of your graduation festivities to get a dog. Not the jerk, obviously. Not the jerk. He's upset, not because he hurt your feelings, but because he knows you recognize the imbalance in your relationship. He's also upset because other people now see how he treated you or now publicly acknowledge it. I'm not saying the following statement to be mean. I'm saying it so you can see how obvious it is to a Reddit random who has never met you or any of your family members. Your brother is self-centered and absolutely puts his own interests above you. Even your mother acknowledges this when you told her that he was not attending because he's picking up a puppy. She said she was disappointed but not surprised. I'm sorry. I can imagine being on the outs with your brother hurts a lot. This is a big step in claiming the respect you deserve, and I hope you realize that and stand your ground. You've done nothing to feel guilty about. I get that you still do feel guilty, but this outside observer absolves you of any unwarranted guilt. Honestly, I think everyone sucks here. You for being the clingy older sister that never took a hint growing up, and it took you until you were almost 30. Your parents for not noticing this and intervening when you guys were kids. Your brother for being passive the whole time and not being direct with you to give him space. Seems like a lot of unspoken emotions. Clingy older sister that never took the hint? Wow, just wow. For doing creepy stalker things, like buying her own sibling Christmas presents, I guess? No, like calling your sibling your best friend when they are clearly not. Am I the jerk for telling my wife she was being childish and unreasonable for trying to make me choose between her or my mother? My wife and I have been together for 10 years and married for 3. My wife, Jane Doe, is 29, and I'm 28. Generally speaking, during our years together, we've never really gotten into fights or been at each other's throats. Sadly, this has changed over the last year, ever since my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and I made the choice to care for her using my own funds since my mother has no assets. Recently, we got into a fight because as of late, things have gotten tighter financially. We're not struggling, but our lifestyle has become rather limited compared to what it was prior to me taking care of my mother financially. I've also been less available because I took on a different role at the job, higher pay, but more responsibilities and longer hours. She's been trying to get me to place my mother in a Medicaid-funded nursing facility, and she knows how I feel about that. We both work in the medical field, and we both know exactly what will happen to a case like my mother, who is fully ambulatory but requires hand-over-hand care, but can be combative with strangers because she's oriented to a person rather than a place. I told her even if we went with her idea, does she really think that will make things better? I will still go visit her often just to make sure they're doing right by her, and a private memory care facility would be 2 to 3 times as much what I'm currently paying for her home care. Then she asked, what about us though? We're young. We should be living and enjoying our lives, creating memories and experiences, which I agree with, and I told her we can still do that, just not at the frequency we once did. Then she started to tell me everything I already knew, and at this point, I started to lose my cool. I know it's progressive. I know at one point, if she lives long enough, she will need skilled nursing care. I know spending nearly $6,000 to $8,000 a month on her expenses is not financially sane. She's my mother though. Everything I have is because of her. She made countless sacrifices to raise me by herself, and it was not easy raising a kid, let alone one on the spectrum working multiple jobs by yourself. My wife knows this and knows how much my mom means to me. She tried to play, if your mother was of sound mind, she would want you to enjoy your life and to live happy. I snapped at this point. Sure, you may be right, but if we were really struggling, we're giving up extra vacations and freedom. This is where she replied with, then you have to choose me or your mother. I cannot live this way anymore. At this point, I told her she was being childish and unreasonable, and if she divorces, so be it. But don't try and play the victim or act as if she's being reasonable. Had it been her family, I would understand and do everything I can to support her through it. That's what partners do. They support one another, help lift them up when they fall, not kick them while they're down. You're the jerk. People with Alzheimer's and dementia belong in care homes. Unless you're paying your wife for her help, it's wrong. I say this as someone who had family in both categories. Why are you even making this post? For validation? So as to make you feel that you did nothing wrong and the only bad person is your wife? Because after reading your post and your comments, you absolutely don't want to compromise or accept the judgment of others. So why are you even posting here? You're the jerk. You have the right to take care of your mother, and she has the right to feel upset with it because it's taking away from your presence in the relationship and marriage, and also puts a financial strain in your relationship. For every response, you're just trying to argue with the commenter and don't seem to understand or accept their opinions. If you don't want opinions, then don't post here and ask for judgment. You're only wasting others' time. And lastly, you're the jerk. Not because you want to take care of your mother, but because you don't care what your partner feels and how you even, after posting in this sub, you're not ready to take others' opinions. You're the jerk for the specific question you asked. Am I the jerk for telling my wife she's being childish and unreasonable for trying to make me choose between her or my mother? Yes, you are the jerk because your wife is not childish nor unreasonable according to any mature criteria. She wanted to have an equal discussion with you where the outcome was not predetermined. That isn't childish or unreasonable. She has concerns about the future of your marriage. That's something most spouses would treat seriously and not call childish. She has not been consulted on financial decisions that affect her too. That's how kids are treated, but it does not make her a kid to point out how inappropriate that is. Please believe that all of my sympathies are here with you in your obvious love for your mother and the difficulties her care will bring you. I admire your devotion to her and willingness to support her. For that, you're definitely not the jerk. But your inability to see any solution here but the one you have chosen makes you the jerk. So does your lack of empathy for your wife. You see the situation as black and white. Your wife feels it's more complex than that. Don't insult her by calling her childish or unreasonable until you listen openly to her concerns. I hope you two can come to an understanding about the next steps. You're the jerk. Based on your comments, your wife didn't have any say in the decision to care for your mother. You presented your decision to her and went on your way. That's not how a partnership works. You're not a jerk for wanting to take care of your mother. Your wife is not a jerk for wanting no part in that. However, you are a jerk for being a bad partner and then losing your cool when your wife starts a discussion. If you want a chance for your marriage to continue, you should both seek counseling to figure out what to do. In the meantime, start thinking about how you're failing to support your wife/partner instead of blaming her for not supporting you. How dare he try to support his mother who's dealing with Alzheimer's, knowing that his wife and him would have to cut down on luxury vacations. I'd divorce him too. Am I the jerk for wanting my sister to pay me back because my nephew lost my electric scooter? Last year, I bought an electric scooter, which I've since modified to add more speed, a new handlebar, and some other mods. The scooter itself was not cheap at $1,500, plus mods put it over $2,000. I have a sister who's 43 and a nephew who's 13 who I always let house sit for me while I'm out of town on business. I have pets and plants that I need taken care of, and they always welcome a change of scenery. So I had to go on a business trip last month for a week, and I let them house sit. My nephew has always asked me about my scooter, and I told him that it isn't for kids because it's extremely fast, and I've expressly forbidden him from riding it multiple times. His mother knows about this as well. Well, I came back from my trip, and my sister tells me that I'm going to be mad, but my nephew took my scooter out, left it unattended, and it was stolen. I was upset and asked them to leave. I told them they'd have to replace it, and my sister pleaded with me. They couldn't afford it. It was a mistake, and that he could just do chores around my house to pay me back. I told her that it doesn't replace my scooter. She said that any money would have to come from their vacation fund. I said, oh well. Our parents have gotten involved and said that I'm taking this too far. They agree that my nephew should be punished and I should be paid back, but to take away their family vacation is just cruel and petty. They suggested a payment plan. I told them no, that I use my scooter to commute to work often and that I wanted it back immediately. Furthermore, he was warned not to ride it since it's dangerous. Now that I've started to calm down here a little, I'm wondering if I'm being a jerk here by being so demanding and potentially punishing everyone else for my nephew's mistake. She said that the money would have to come from their vacation fund? If replacing the scooter meant they'd have to use money reserved for basic necessities, rent or mortgage, food, utilities, then I'd say you might want to reconsider the payment plan option. But if they're upset because they can't take a vacation this year because of this, then tough crap. Not the jerk. Not the jerk. Your sister should pay you. Your parents can pay money into your sister's vacation budget. Your sister can make payments back to your parents. Solved. Not the jerk. Repaying you comes before a vacation. You need it to commute to work. Their neglect caused it to be stolen, so they need to face the consequences, especially since it was expressly forbidden that he ride it. Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video. Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.